My son's wife said, "Stop living with us in the same house. Find yourself a room to rent." My son nodded. I smiled and left. But they didn't know that the house belonged to me. In the morning, their things were standing at the doorstep. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I had lived in this house for 37 years. Every corner held a memory. David's first steps in the hallway. My late husband Tom planting roses in the garden. Family dinners around the oak table I'd inherited from my mother. When David married Ashley 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy. My son had found love, and I welcomed her with open arms. They needed a place to stay while saving for their own home, and I offered mine without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," I'd said, imagining cozy evenings together, shared laughter, perhaps grandchildren running through these rooms one day. The first 6 months were pleasant enough. Ashley was polite, helpful even. She'd cook dinner occasionally, and we'd watch movies together while David worked late at the accounting firm. But gradually, things shifted. Small things at first. She'd rearrange my kitchen without asking, claiming it was more efficient. She'd invite her friends over without giving me notice, and I'd find myself retreating to my bedroom like a guest in my own home. When I mentioned it to David, he'd smile weakly and say, "Mom, she's just trying to help. You know how particular you are about things." Was I being particular? I started questioning myself. Maybe I was too set in my ways, too resistant to change. After all, I was 63 years old, and they were young, building their future. I tried to be more flexible, to give them space, to smile when Ashley redecorated the living room with modern furniture that clashed horribly with the home's character. Then came the comments. Subtle at first. "Margaret, don't you think this house is too big for one person?" Ashley asked one evening, her tone dripping with false concern. "I mean, all these stairs must be hard on your knees." I assured her my knees were fine. Another time. David and I were thinking, wouldn't you be happier in a smaller place? Maybe one of those nice senior communities where you could make friends your own age? I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but pushed it away. The real shift happened about 2 months ago. I started noticing them whispering, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. David became distant, avoiding eye contact. Ashley's politeness developed an edge, a thinly veiled impatience. She'd sigh heavily when I joined them for dinner, as if my presence was an inconvenience. I wasn't imagining it anymore. One Tuesday evening, I came home from my book club to find them in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. They didn't hear me enter. "It's the perfect location," Ashley was saying. "Once we get her out, we can renovate the whole place. This house is worth at least $800,000 in the current market." My blood ran cold. David's response was quieter, hesitant, but he didn't disagree. I backed out silently, my hands shaking. That night, I barely slept. The confrontation came on a Friday evening. I had just finished preparing dinner, my special lasagna, David's favorite since childhood. I thought perhaps a nice meal might bring us closer, might dissolve whatever tension had built up between us. How naive I was. Ashley walked into the kitchen, David trailing behind her like a shadow. She didn't even glance at the food I'd spent hours preparing. Instead, she crossed her arms and looked at me with those cold blue eyes I'd mistaken for friendly just months ago. "Margaret, we need to talk," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. I wiped my hands on my apron, trying to steady my breathing. "Of course, dear. What's on your mind?" "This living arrangement isn't working out," she continued. "David and I need our space. We're starting a family, and we can't do that with you, hovering around all the time." The words hit me like a physical blow. Hovering? In my own home? I didn't realize I was hovering, I said carefully. Perhaps we can— No. Ashley cut me off, her tone sharp. There's no perhaps. We've made our decision. It's time for you to find your own place. There are plenty of rooms for rent in town. You should start looking. I turned to David, desperately hoping he'd defend me, tell her she was being unreasonable. But my son, my boy, just stood there and nodded. Actually nodded in agreement. Something inside me broke and hardened simultaneously. I smiled then. A calm, quiet smile that seemed to confuse them both. I see, I said softly. Of course. I'll start looking. And I walked out of the kitchen, leaving my lasagna cooling on the counter, leaving them standing there with their victory, leaving them completely unaware that this house, this beautiful house they were already planning to renovate, belonged entirely to me. I sat in my bedroom that night, staring at the wallpaper Tom and I had chosen together 20 years ago. Delicate blue flowers on cream background. He'd joked that it looked like a grandmother's house. You'll grow into it, he'd teased. I pressed my palm against the wall now, feeling the texture, the permanence of it. What had I lost? Not just my dignity, though that stung terribly. I'd lost my son. The boy I'd raised alone after Tom's heart attack, the child I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, had just stood there and nodded while his wife kicked me out of my own home. How had it come to this? When had David become this stranger who couldn't meet my eyes? I pulled out my jewelry box from the closet and retrieved the document I kept hidden beneath the velvet lining. The deed to this house. My name. Margaret Ann Sullivan. Sole owner. Tom had left it to me, and I'd never added David's name despite his occasional hints over the years. Some instinct had always stopped me. Thank God for that instinct. Fear crept through me as I sat there in the darkness. What if they became violent when they discovered the truth? What if David chose Ashley over me permanently? What if I ended up alone, having lost my son in the process of defending my property? I was one woman against 2 younger, stronger people who clearly had no qualms about manipulating me. But beneath the fear, something else grew. A cold, calculated anger. I had not survived Tom's death, had not built a successful career as a paralegal, had not raised a son on my own, only to be discarded like an inconvenient piece of furniture in my golden years. If they wanted to play games, I would show them what a woman with 37 years of legal experience could do. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. By sunrise, I had made several decisions. First, I would document everything. Every conversation, every interaction would be recorded, legally, of course. Colorado was a one-party consent state. I would purchase a small recording device. Second, I would consult with Robert Chen, my former colleague who now specialized in property and family law. Third, I would not reveal my hand too early. Let them think they'd won, let them grow comfortable in their assumed victory. Saturday morning, I emerged from my bedroom with red eyes, not entirely faked, and a submissive demeanor. Ashley was making coffee in my kitchen, humming cheerfully. The sight made my stomach turn, but I maintained my composure. I've been looking at some listings, I said quietly, placing my laptop on the table. I'd actually been researching tenant rights and eviction laws, but the screen showed apartment rentals. There's a studio apartment near downtown. It's small, but I think it might work. Ashley glanced over, barely interested. That's good, Margaret. When can you move? The listing says it's available in 30 days, I replied, my voice trembling just slightly. Perfect performance. I'll need time to pack, of course. 37 years of belongings. 30 days is fine, she said dismissively. Maybe even better. Gives us time to plan the renovations." She actually smiled at me then, a victor's smile. David appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Mom, are you okay with this?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he become so weak, so easily manipulated? "What choice do I have, David?" I said softly. "You've both made your wishes clear." Guilt flickered across his face, but Ashley swooped in immediately. "It's for the best, Margaret. You'll see. You'll probably love having your own space, no responsibilities. You can join senior groups, take up hobbies, senior groups, as if I were already 1 foot in the grave." "You're probably right," I said meekly. That afternoon, while they went out to meet with a contractor, already planning their dream renovations, I drove to an electronics store and purchased a small digital recorder. Then I visited Robert Chen's office. Robert had been a junior attorney when I was a senior paralegal at Morrison & Associates. Now he ran his own practice, and he owed me several favors from the years I'd mentored him. "Margaret," he greeted me warmly, "what brings you here on a Saturday?" I sat down and told him everything. His expression grew darker with each detail. "They're trying to force you out of your own home?" he said incredulously. "Do they even know you own it?" "I don't think so," I replied. "David knows I inherited it, but I don't think he understands what that means. And Ashley, I don't think she's bothered to ask." Robert leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Margaret, this is fairly straightforward from a legal standpoint. You're the sole owner. You can evict them at any time. The question is, how do you want to handle this?" I smiled then, that same calm smile I'd given Ashley the night before. "I want them to understand exactly what they've done. I want them to feel the full weight of their actions, and I want it to be completely legal and unassailable." "Then we'll need to be strategic," Robert said, returning my smile. "Let me explain what we can do." Robert and I spent 2 hours mapping out my strategy. Every step had to be methodical, documented, and legally bulletproof. He explained that while I had every right to evict them immediately, doing so hastily might give them grounds to claim elder abuse or undue influence. "We need to build an ironclad case," he said. "Documentation is everything." On Monday morning, I took my first official step. I visited the county clerk's office and requested a certified copy of my property deed. The clerk, a pleasant woman named Sandra, processed my request efficiently. "Beautiful property on Maple Street," she commented. "You've owned it quite a while, haven't you?" 37 years, I confirmed, watching as she stamped the official seal. "And I intend to keep it." That document, crisp, official, irrefutable, went into a folder I began carrying with me everywhere. I also stopped by my bank and requested statements showing the mortgage had been paid off for 15 years. Every utility bill, every property tax payment, all in my name alone. David had never contributed a cent to this house's upkeep, I realized. He and Ashley had been living rent-free for 3 years, and this was my thanks. Over the next week, I meticulously documented their behavior. The recorder in my pocket captured Ashley's increasingly demanding tone, her comments about when this is finally our house, her plans to turn my sewing room into a nursery. David said less, but his silence was its own form of betrayal. Wednesday evening, they invited friends over, without asking me, naturally. I stayed in my room, but I could hear them through the walls. The recorder caught everything. "You're so lucky to have this house," one friend said. "The location is incredible." "Well, we'll officially own it soon," Ashley replied. I could hear the whine in her voice, the looseness of too much celebration. "David's mom is moving out, finally. She's been cramping our style for way too long." "Isn't this her house, though?" another voice asked. A male voice, uncertain. Technically, Ashley laughed, but she's old, you know? She doesn't need all this space. We convinced her it's time to downsize. David's an only child, so eventually it'll be ours anyway. We're just accelerating the timeline. My hands clenched around the recorder. The casual cruelty of it, the entitlement, the way she spoke about me as if I were already dead. Thursday afternoon, something shifted. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when David entered, looking agitated. He'd been on his phone, and his face was pale. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. My heart rate increased, but I kept my voice steady. "Of course, dear." He sat down heavily at the table. "I was just on the phone with the insurance company. They needed to update our homeowner's policy, and they asked for the property owner's information." He looked at me strangely. "Mom, the house is still in your name. Just your name." There it was, the first crack in their facade. "Yes, David," I said calmly, turning back to my sandwich. "It is. But when Dad died, didn't he leave it to both of us?" I turned to face him fully. "Your father left everything to me, David, as spouses typically do. I've maintained, paid for, and cared for this house alone for 15 years. His face cycled through several emotions. Confusion, realization, something that might have been shame. "Does Ashley know?" "I don't believe she's ever asked," I replied. "She seems to have made a lot of assumptions." He stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. I should tell her." I watched him practically run from the room. This was the moment. The point of no return. 30 minutes later, I heard them arguing upstairs. Ashley's voice rose sharply. "What do you mean it's her house? You said it would be ours." I assumed after she moved out she'd sign it over." David's voice, defensive and weak. "You assumed? Did you actually ask her? Did you verify anything?" The argument intensified. I heard my name repeatedly, along with words I won't repeat. Then came footsteps thundering down the stairs. Ashley burst into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. "We need to talk, now." I set down my knife, I'd been cutting vegetables, and looked at her calmly. "About what, dear? About this house? David says you're the sole owner." "That's correct," I confirmed. "I am." "And you were just going to let us think. You were going to move out and leave us here, in your house." Her voice dripped with accusation, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. "You told me to find a room for rent," I said evenly. "You said this living arrangement wasn't working. I was simply complying with your demands." David appeared behind her, looking miserable. "Mom, maybe we should all sit down and discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" Ashley spun on him. "Your mother has been playing us." I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. "Playing you? I've been living in my own home, Ashley. You've been living in mine. For free, I might add. And now you're angry that you can't simply take it from me?" The mask dropped completely then. Ashley's face contorted with rage. "You manipulative old—" "Careful," I interrupted, my voice like ice. "You're still a guest in my home, and guests can be asked to leave." The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Inside was a handwritten letter from David. His attempt at reconciliation, or perhaps manipulation. "Mom, I think we all said things we didn't mean yesterday. Let's talk this through as a family. We can work something out that's fair for everyone. Love, David. Fair for everyone." The words rang hollow. I went downstairs to find them both at the kitchen table, looking remarkably composed. Too composed. They'd clearly spent the evening strategizing. "Margaret, sit down, please," Ashley said, her tone artificially warm. "We want to apologize for yesterday. Things got heated, and we all said things we regret." I sat, saying nothing, waiting. David leaned forward. Mom, we've been thinking. What if we bought the house from you? We could offer you a fair price, and you could use that money to buy a nice condo somewhere, maybe even have money left over for travel, hobbies. We'd even go above market value, Ashley added quickly. Say, 850,000? That's very generous. I almost laughed. They'd researched the value. Ashley's comment about 800,000 had been conservative. The house was actually worth closer to 950,000, and they knew it. This was their new tactic, make me think I was getting a good deal while they profited. That's an interesting offer, I said carefully. Let me think about it. Relief flooded their faces. They thought they'd won again. That afternoon, I drove to Robert's office and told him about their offer. He shook his head. They're trying to legally obtain what they couldn't take by deception. Margaret, you don't have to sell. This is your home. I know, I said, and I'm not going to. It's time to execute the plan. Robert nodded and pulled out the documents we'd prepared. Formal eviction notice, 30 days, completely legal, completely clear. Are you ready for the fallout? More than ready, I confirmed. That evening, I waited until they were both home, together in the living room watching television. I walked in and placed 2 envelopes on the coffee table in front of them. What's this? David asked. That is your formal 30-day notice to vacate the premises, I said calmly. As the sole legal owner of this property, I'm exercising my right to reclaim my home for my own exclusive use. The color drained from Ashley's face. David picked up the envelope with shaking hands and read the official legal document inside. Mom, you can't be serious, he whispered. I'm completely serious, David. You both made it very clear that this living arrangement wasn't working. I agree. So I'm ending it. Ashley stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. This is ridiculous. We're family. You can't just throw us out. You were prepared to throw me out, I replied evenly. What's the difference? The difference is that we're young. We have our whole lives ahead of us. You're old. You don't need all this space. Ashley's voice rose to a shrill pitch. My age is irrelevant to my property rights, I said. Then came the threats. Ashley's eyes narrowed dangerously. If you do this, you'll never see any grandchildren. Never. We'll make sure of it. The words were meant to wound, and they did. But I'd anticipated this. That's your choice to make, Ashley, I said quietly. But it doesn't change the legal reality. You have 30 days. David finally found his voice. Mom, please. Can't we work something out? We'll pay rent. No, I interrupted firmly. You had years to offer rent. You had years to treat me with basic respect in my own home. You made your choice when you tried to force me out. Now I'm making mine. Ashley lunged toward me then, her face twisted with rage. You bitter old bitch! You're just jealous because I have David and you have nothing. You're alone, and you'll die alone in this house. David grabbed her arm, pulling her back, but he didn't defend me. Even now, he didn't defend his own mother. I turned and walked toward the stairs, my legs shaking, but my voice steady. 30 days, Ashley. I suggest you start packing. Behind me, I heard something shatter. She'd thrown something, and David's voice trying to calm her. I locked my bedroom door and sat on my bed, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and the aftermath of confrontation. Robert had warned me it would get ugly. He'd been right. Over the next few days, they tried everything. David left pleading notes. Ashley alternated between icy silence and explosive anger. They stopped cleaning, stopped doing dishes, left messes everywhere. Petty rebellion. One morning, I found my favorite teacup shattered in the sink. Accident? I doubted it. Then came the real escalation. David knocked on my door one evening, his face grave. "Mom, Ashley's been researching. She thinks you might have diminished capacity. That maybe you're not thinking clearly. She's talking about getting a lawyer, having you evaluated." The threat was clear. They'd try to have me declared incompetent, take control through conservatorship. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. "Tell Ashley that I've already consulted with Robert Chen, and that any attempt to pursue that route will be met with a countersuit for elder abuse and harassment. I have documentation of everything, David. Every conversation, every threat, everything." His face fell. "You recorded us?" "Colorado is a one-party consent state," I replied. "Perfectly legal." He left without another word. After that confrontation, they seemed to retreat, though the hostility in the house was palpable. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The stress was wearing on me. I'd developed a persistent headache and my blood pressure was elevated when I checked it. On day 10 of the 30-day notice, I decided I needed a break before I collapsed from the tension. I called my sister Helen in Phoenix. "Come stay with me for a few days," she urged immediately. "Get out of that toxic environment." I booked a flight for the following morning. I didn't tell David or Ashley I was leaving, just left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone for a few days. Notice period still stands. M." Phoenix's dry heat and Helen's supportive presence were exactly what I needed to recover my strength for what was still to come. Helen's guest room overlooked a garden of desert flowers and cacti. For the first 3 days, I mostly slept, my body finally releasing the tension it had been holding. Helen brought me herbal tea and let me talk when I was ready. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly on the 3rd evening as we sat on her patio, watching the sunset. "What they tried to do to you, it's unconscionable. David should be ashamed." "He's my son," I said, though the words hurt to speak. "How did I raise someone who could—" "You raised him fine," Helen interrupted. "But Ashley got her hooks in him, and he's too weak to stand up to her. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Margaret. You can only save yourself." Her words settled something in me. I'd been carrying guilt about the eviction, wondering if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. But Helen was right. I was protecting myself from people who'd shown me exactly who they were. On day 4 in Phoenix, my phone rang. David. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello?" "Mom?" His voice was different. Softer, almost desperate. "Please come home. We need to talk. I'll be home when I'm ready, David. The notice period hasn't changed." "Ashley's sorry, really sorry. She wants to apologize in person. We both do." He sounded genuine, but I'd learned not to trust that anymore. "Apologies don't change the situation," I said calmly. "What if we left sooner? What if we moved out this weekend, before the 30 days? Would that help? Could we start over?" I paused. This was unexpected. "You found a place?" "We're working on it. Ashley's parents might help us with a rental. Mom, please, give us a chance to make this right." Every instinct screamed that this was manipulation, another strategy. But a small part of me, the part that still remembered David as a boy, wanted to hope. "I'll be home in 2 days," I said. "We can talk then." After hanging up, I told Helen about the conversation. She looked skeptical. "Be careful, Maggie. Cornered animals are dangerous." I returned home on a Tuesday afternoon to find the house suspiciously clean. The dishes were done, surfaces were spotless, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the dining table. Flowers I recognized from my own garden. But still, the gesture was there. David and Ashley were waiting in the living room, both dressed nicely, both looking contrite. Ashley even stood when I entered, something she'd never done before. "Margaret," she began. and I noticed she was clutching David's hand tightly. I owe you an enormous apology. I was terrible to you. Absolutely terrible. I got caught up in dreams of what I wanted, and I forgot about basic human decency, about respecting you and your home. It was a practiced speech. I could hear the rehearsal in it. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, taking a seat across from them. We want to make amends, David added. Really make things right. What if we stayed, but we paid rent? Proper market rate rent, and we'd respect your space, your rules. This is your home, and we were wrong to forget that. Ashley nodded enthusiastically. We could even sign a formal lease, whatever you want, and I promise, I swear, I'll be respectful. No more comments, no more trying to change things. I'll be a good tenant and daughter-in-law. I studied them both. Ashley's eyes were wide, pleading. David looked hopeful. If I didn't know better, I might have believed them. That's a very generous offer, I said slowly. Relief flooded their faces. However, I continued, and watched the relief evaporate. The answer is no. Mom, David started. I held up my hand. David, do you remember what you taught me about trust? You were 7 years old, and you'd been lying about brushing your teeth. When I confronted you, do you remember what you said? He looked confused. No, you said, trust is like a mirror, Mom. Once it's broken, you can try to fix it, but you'll always see the cracks. You were such a wise child. I smiled sadly. You and Ashley broke my trust. Shattered it. Even if I wanted to believe this apology, I can't. I'll always see the cracks. Ashley's face began to redden. So that's it? One mistake and we're just thrown away? One mistake? I raised my eyebrows. Ashley, you spent months planning to take my home from me. You manipulated my son. You spoke about me with contempt to your friends. This wasn't one mistake. This was a prolonged campaign. She stood abruptly. Fine, we tried. David, tell her. David looked between us, conflicted. Tell me what? I asked. We recorded this conversation too, he said quietly. We were going to use it to show how reasonable we were being, how unreasonable you were, in case we needed it for court. I almost laughed. For court? On what grounds, David? I own this house. I have every legal right to evict tenants. You have no case. We thought maybe public opinion, Ashley said bitterly. Social media. Cruel mother throws out son and pregnant wife. The word hung in the air. Pregnant? I repeated. Ashley's hand went to her stomach, a gesture so calculated it made me sick. 3 weeks, but I guess that doesn't matter to you either. I stood up, gathering every ounce of composure. If you are actually pregnant, Ashley, then I suggest you use these next 18 days to find suitable housing for your growing family. If you're lying, which I suspect you are, then I suggest you use the time to reflect on your life choices. Either way, the eviction stands. Please leave my living room. They left, Ashley's face twisted with fury, David's blank with shock. After they went upstairs, I sat alone in my clean living room with its fresh flowers and felt nothing but cold certainty. Helen had been right. They'd shown me exactly who they were. And I believed them. 3 days passed in cold silence. Ashley and David kept to themselves, emerging only for necessities. I heard them on phone calls, presumably searching for apartments, though part of me wondered if they were plotting something else entirely. On Friday evening, there was a knock at my bedroom door. Gentle, respectful. Mom, can we please talk? All 3 of us? David's voice sounded tired, defeated. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. What is it? Downstairs, please, just give us 15 minutes. I followed him down to find the dining room table set for 3. Candles, my good china. Ashley stood near the table in a dress I'd never seen her wear. Modest, conservative, the kind a daughter-in-law might wear to a family dinner. "What is this?" I asked warily. "A peace offering," Ashley said softly. "I made your favorite, pot roast with those little potatoes you like. And David made his grandmother's biscuits from the recipe you gave him." The smell was enticing. The scene was disarmingly domestic. "Please, Mom, sit. Let's have one nice meal together. No arguing, no fighting, just family." David pulled out a chair for me. Every instinct screamed danger, but I sat. I wouldn't eat or drink anything. I'd learned that much from my paralegal days and the cases of poisoning I'd read about. But I would listen. Ashley served the food with perfect grace, playing hostess in my dining room. She smiled. She made small talk about the weather, about a funny thing that happened at her work. David joined in, telling a story about a client at the firm. It was all so normal. So much like I'd imagined dinners would be when they first moved in. "This is very nice," I said carefully, "but it doesn't change anything." Ashley's smile flickered slightly. "We know. We're not trying to change your mind. We wanted to thank you for all the time you've given us, for opening your home. We were ungrateful and we wanted to show you that we recognize that now. Before we leave," David added, "we wanted you to know that we're genuinely sorry, that we understand what we did was wrong." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that. We found a place," Ashley continued, "a 2-bedroom apartment in Lakewood. It's small and it's expensive, but we signed the lease yesterday. We'll be out in a week." "That's good," I said. Ashley leaned forward then, her expression earnest. "Margaret, I know the trust is broken. I know we can't fix that overnight, or maybe ever. But I really hope that someday, maybe years from now, we can rebuild some kind of relationship. Because this baby," she touched her stomach again, "deserves to know their grandmother." There it was, the hook, the manipulation disguised as sentiment. "If there is a baby," I said evenly, "and if you genuinely want a relationship, then you'll need to demonstrate through actions, not words. Consistency over time. That's how trust is rebuilt." "We understand," David said quickly. "And we will. We'll show you." Ashley stood suddenly. "Actually, Margaret, since we're being honest, there's something I need to say." Her tone shifted, sharpened. "You talk about trust, about respect, but have you been completely honest with us?" I felt ice in my veins. "What do you mean? You never told David this house was only in your name. You let him assume for years that it would be his someday. That's a lie of omission, isn't it?" "The house was never promised to David," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. "But he's your only child," Ashley's voice rose. "Where else would it go? To charity, to your sister. You led him to believe—" "I led him to believe nothing. David made assumptions. That's not my fault." Ashley's mask was slipping fast now. "You're a selfish old woman. You're sitting in this huge house all alone, and you won't even let your own son, your own flesh and blood, build a life here with you." "Ashley," David warned, but she ignored him. "No, David. She needs to hear this." Ashley turned back to me, her face flushed. "You want to know the truth? You're doing this because you're bitter. Because your husband died and left you alone, and you can't stand to see us happy together. You can't stand that David chose me over you." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. "This dinner is over." "We're not finished!" Ashley slammed her hand on the table, making the china rattle. "Yes, you are," I said coldly. "You came here pretending to make peace, but this was just another manipulation. Another attempt to guilt me, to make me the villain in your story. But I'm not the villain, Ashley. I'm the homeowner who was disrespected in her own home, and nothing you say will change that." "You'll regret this," Ashley shouted as I walked toward the stairs. When you're old and sick and need help, don't come crawling to us. When you die alone in this house, remember that you chose it. I stopped on the third step and turned back. I'd rather die alone with my dignity intact than live with people who view me as an obstacle to overcome. David was still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. Ashley was shaking with rage. The carefully set dinner sat between them, growing cold. 1 week, I said quietly, and if you're still here, I'll begin formal eviction proceedings through the sheriff's office. I went to my room and locked the door, my hands trembling. The fear was real. Ashley's threats, the venom in her voice, the realization of how much she truly hated me. But beneath the fear was something stronger, an absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. I called Robert Chen. "Document this," he said immediately when I told him what happened. "Write down everything she said, every threat. We may need it." That night, I heard them moving furniture upstairs, slamming drawers, punching walls, the sounds of impotent rage. And I sat in my room, calm and resolute, waiting for the storm to pass. Moving day arrived cold and gray, matching the atmosphere in the house. I'd arranged to have Robert Chen present as a witness, and I'd also hired 2 professional movers, not to help them, but to ensure everything was documented and no accusations of theft or property damage could be made against me later. Ashley and David had been loading their car since dawn. The pile of boxes and furniture in the driveway grew steadily. I watched from the kitchen window, drinking my coffee, saying nothing. At 10 o'clock, Robert arrived with a camera and a notary. "Everything by the book," he reminded me. "They can't claim you did anything improper." At 11, Ashley stormed into the house one final time. "We need to talk about the furniture," she announced. "The couch in the living room, David's father sat on that couch. It has sentimental value. We're taking it. That couch belongs to the house," I said calmly. "It stays." "It was Tom's." "It was our couch, mine and Tom's, and it stays with me." Ashley's face contorted. "Fine, keep your precious couch. But the kitchen table, I refinished that table. I spent weeks working on it." "You refinished my table without permission," I corrected. "It stays." This continued for another 20 minutes. Ashley trying to claim various items, me calmly refusing each request. David stood in the doorway, saying nothing, his face a mask of misery. Finally, Ashley played her final card. She pulled out her phone and opened it to a video. "Maybe this will change your mind about how reasonable you're being." She hit play. It was a video she'd clearly recorded secretly weeks ago. Me talking to myself in the kitchen, muttering about where I'd put my reading glasses, getting frustrated when I couldn't find them. Taken out of context, it looked like the confused ramblings of someone with dementia. "I have hours of footage like this," Ashley said smugly. "You talking to yourself, forgetting things, getting confused. One call to Adult Protective Services, and they'll investigate whether you're competent to live alone, whether you should even be making these kinds of decisions." My stomach dropped, but Robert stepped forward immediately. "That's elder abuse," he said firmly. "Threatening to make a false report to APS is a crime in Colorado. It's also grounds for a restraining order." Ashley's confidence wavered. "It's not false. Look at the video." "I see a woman talking to herself, which millions of people do," Robert replied. "I also see you admitting you have hours of secretly recorded footage, which, depending on where it was recorded, may violate wiretapping laws. Would you like to continue this conversation?" Ashley looked at David desperately. "Say something." David finally spoke, but not to support her. "Ashley, just stop. Please, let's just go." "Go?" Ashley whirled on him. "After everything we've been through, after I've stood by you, supported you, loved you, and you're just going to let your mother win?" "She's not winning anything," David said quietly. "This is her house. It was always her house. We were wrong, Ashley. We were so wrong. Something in his voice must have shocked Ashley into silence. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she turned back to me and I saw calculation in her eyes. One last manipulation. "I'm pregnant," she said. "I'm actually pregnant, Margaret. I took a test yesterday. You're throwing out your pregnant daughter-in-law and your future grandchild." "Show me the test," I said calmly. Her face flushed. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Then I don't have to believe you," I replied. "And regardless, your pregnancy status doesn't change property law. You still need to leave." Ashley's control finally shattered completely. She screamed, an incoherent sound of pure rage, and grabbed the vase of flowers from the entry table, hurling it against the wall. Water and glass and roses exploded across my hardwood floor. "You bitch!" she shrieked. "You miserable, lonely, pathetic old bitch! You have nothing! No one loves you. No one will ever love you. You're going to die alone and no one will care." Robert immediately began recording on his phone. The movers I'd hired stood frozen, witnesses to the meltdown. David grabbed Ashley's arm. "Ashley, stop! You're making it worse!" She shook him off violently. "Worse? Worse? It can't get worse. She's taking everything from us. The house, our future, our—" "We never had the house!" David shouted, louder than I'd ever heard him. "It was never ours. Mom offered us a place to stay, and we repaid her kindness by trying to steal her home. Don't you understand how insane that is?" Ashley stared at him, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. "You're choosing her. After everything. You're choosing her over me." "I'm choosing reality over delusion," David said, suddenly sounding exhausted. "I'm choosing to face the fact that we were wrong, that I was wrong, that I betrayed my own mother because I was too weak to stand up to you." The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley looked between David and me, her expression cycling through rage, disbelief, and finally, cold hatred. "Fine," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Fine. You want us gone? We're gone. But don't expect to ever hear from me again. Don't expect photos of your grandchild. Don't expect birthday cards or holidays or anything. You're dead to me, Margaret. Both of you are dead to me." She grabbed her purse and walked out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. David stood in the wreckage, broken glass, scattered roses, the water staining my floor. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I wanted to comfort him. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, that we could fix this. But the other part, the part that had been wounded so deeply, couldn't quite reach him yet. "Finish moving your things, David," I said gently. "And then we'll talk, but not today." He nodded and walked out to the driveway, where Ashley was already in the car, staring straight ahead. Robert touched my shoulder. "You okay?" I looked around my entry hall, my home, still mine, always mine. I will be. By 6 o'clock that evening, they were gone. The house was silent in a way it hadn't been in 3 years. I walked through each room, reclaiming my space. The living room without their clutter. The kitchen without Ashley's improvements. My sewing room still intact, not converted to a nursery. Robert had stayed until the last box was loaded, documenting everything. "You handled that with remarkable composure," he said before leaving, especially when she lost control at the end. "Years of legal training," I replied, "and the absolute certainty that I was in the right." After he left, I stood in my quiet house and felt the weight of the past month. No, the past 3 years. Finally lift from my shoulders. The next morning, David called. "Mom, can I come over, alone, just to talk?" I agreed, curious what he had to say now that Ashley wasn't there to script his words. He arrived, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were hollow, his shirt wrinkled. "Ashley left," he said immediately. "She went to her parents' house in California. She said she needs space to think about our marriage." I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, The table Ashley had tried to claim yesterday. I don't know how it got so bad, David said quietly. When we first started dating, Ashley was different. Or maybe I just didn't see who she really was. She had this way of making me feel like I was never doing enough, never being enough. And gradually, I started believing her. David, I began, but he held up his hand. Let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. When she suggested we ask you to move out, I knew it was wrong. I knew it in my gut. But she convinced me it was reasonable, that we deserved the space, that you'd be happier elsewhere. And I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was admitting that I'd married someone who could be that cruel. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I betrayed you, Mom. My own mother. The woman who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, who stayed up with me when I was sick, who taught me right from wrong. And I nodded when she told you to leave your own home. Yes, I said simply. You did. He flinched at my honesty, but I wasn't going to soften it. He needed to hear it. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what she was doing, what I allowed to happen. And I'm ashamed. Shame is a start, I replied. But it's not enough, David. You need to understand why you let it happen. Why you were willing to hurt someone who loved you unconditionally for someone who clearly loved you conditionally. I know, he whispered. I've already made an appointment with a therapist. I need to figure out why I'm so weak, why I let people manipulate me. We sat in silence for a moment. Then David asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can we fix this? Us? Can you ever trust me again? I considered lying, offering him easy comfort, but our relationship had been damaged by lies. Lies of omission, lies of cowardice, lies of convenience. If we were going to rebuild, it needed to be on truth. I don't know, I said honestly. Trust isn't restored by apologies, David. It's restored by consistent, trustworthy behavior over time. You need to show me, through actions, not words, that you've changed. That might take months. It might take years. And there's no guarantee I'll ever feel the same way about you that I did before all this. He nodded, accepting this. What do I do? Where do I start? You start by living your own life, I said. Get therapy. Figure out your marriage without using me as a crutch or a scapegoat. Make decisions based on what you believe is right, not what someone else tells you to believe. And maybe, eventually, if you do that work, we can have a relationship again. What about Ashley? He asked. If she comes back, if we try to work things out? Then you work it out, I replied firmly. But Ashley is not welcome in this house. Not now, possibly not ever. That bridge was burned completely. You'll need to accept that. The pain on his face was evident, but he nodded. I understand. Before he left, he turned at the door. For what it's worth, Mom, I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you didn't let us take advantage of you. You deserved better than what we gave you. Yes, I agreed. I did. After he left, I called Helen to update her. How do you feel? She asked. Vindicated, I said. Sad, but vindicated. 3 weeks later, I received formal legal notice that Ashley was filing for divorce. Apparently, her parents had convinced her that David was too attached to his mother and would never prioritize his wife properly. The irony was delicious. David took the news hard, but he didn't come running to me for comfort. Instead, he sent a simple text. Ashley filed for divorce. I'm okay. Seeing my therapist tomorrow. Thank you for setting boundaries. I needed to learn this lesson. I replied, I'm sorry you're hurting, but I'm proud of you for facing it with maturity. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. My house was mine again. My life was mine again. And I was at peace. 6 months passed. Spring arrived in Colorado with an explosion of color. The roses Tom had planted bloomed brilliantly, and I spent weekends gardening, reclaiming my yard. I'd made the house truly mine again. I converted the guest room into a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I hired a painter to redo the living room in soft sage green I'd always loved. My book club friends noticed the change immediately. "Margaret, you're glowing," Linda said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I'd started volunteering at the legal aid clinic, helping people navigate housing disputes. The irony wasn't lost on me. David and I had settled into careful reconciliation. Coffee every other Sunday at a cafe downtown. He was attending therapy, learning to set boundaries. He'd moved into a modest apartment and started taking philosophy classes. "I need to figure out who I actually am," he said. Trust was returning slowly. As for Ashley, the reports were increasingly grim. Her parents had grown tired of her drama. She'd lost her job due to conflicts with coworkers. The pregnancy had been a lie. She'd cycled through 2 more failed relationships in 6 months, always the victim. "She's burning every bridge," David observed. "And she still doesn't see that she's the common denominator." I felt no satisfaction, only sad confirmation. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. I'd reconnected with old friends, joined a hiking group, even started dating a retired teacher named Frank. Helen visited in April. "You smile all the time now," she said. "Real smiles. That tension is gone." She was right. The anxiety had evaporated. One Saturday, my neighbor called over. "Margaret, that house looks beautiful." I looked back at my home, my sanctuary. It took some work, but it was worth it. That evening, David texted a photo, him at his study group genuinely smiling. "Finding myself. Thank you for not giving up on me." I replied, "Proud of you. See you Sunday?" Wouldn't miss it. My house was quiet that night, but peaceful. Mine. And that made all the difference. So what did I learn from all this? That family doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you. That your kindness shouldn't come at the cost of your dignity. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to set firm boundaries and enforce them. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that standing alone with integrity beats compromising yourself for company. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back, or would you have let them take what was yours? Think about it. And remember, you teach people how to treat you. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there find their own strength. Your home is your sanctuary. Protect it.